ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी। कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय देवकी नंदनाय च नंदगोपकुमाराय गोविन्दाय नमो नमः। ओम अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनच्छलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपः कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरोः श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं सागरजातं सहगणा रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनासहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सहगणललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च। हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधु जगतपते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमोस्तुते। तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। पंचकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते राधानाथ स्वामिने इति नामिने। नमः ओम विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामिने इति नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे विशेषवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। मुखं करोति वाचालं पंगुं लंघयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्रीगुरुं दीनतारिणं परमानन्दमाधवं श्रीचैतन्येश्वरम्। हरि ओम तत्सत्। Hare Krishna. So again, welcome to the Satsanga of the Srimad Bhagavat. The beauty of the association of the devotees of the Lord, which means all of you, yeah, is actually a very special blessing. There's a very beautiful shloka which is quoted, where it is said that कल्पद्रुमः कल्पितम् एव सूते सा कामधुक् कामितम् एव दोग्धी चिंतामणिश्चिंतितम् एव दत्ते सताम तु संगः sakalam prasute. While there are so many wonderful things which people seek after in this world, so there's this concept of chintamani. Chintamani means it's a special money, magical gem, where if you hold it and wish for something, you can get what you want. Or sometimes chintamani is said to be something that you can touch to iron and it will transform it to gold, like a philosopher's stone. And then there's the kalpa vriksha, that you can go under the kalpa vriksha and ask for something, you will get it. By the way, in Vrindavan, it is said that all trees are kalpa vriksha. So I tried and tested one out, and it turned out to be true. I asked for something standing under a tree. Within 2 minutes, it was granted. But anyway, it doesn't mean that the trees are not obliged. Especially, if the desire is spiritual, they will fulfill. But don't go and try and then blame the tree that this is not kalpa vriksha. So all the trees in the holy dham are kalpa vriksha. And then there is the kamadhuk. Kamadhuk means the wish fulfilling cow. There also you can ask the cow and the cow will fulfill. So all these great, powerful uh, either objects or animals or trees, they're able to fulfill the desire of whatever we ask. Having said this verse says there is one more thing, a fourth thing, which is known as Satsanga, Satam tu Sangha, the association of devotees. And what is special about it as compared to all these three? The special thing about the association of devotees is Satam tu Sangha Sakalam Prasute. That the association of devotees gives one everything. While the previous three things, the Kalpavriksha, the Chintamani, and the Kamadhenu, you have to ask for something to get something. Yes, you have to ask only, then you'll get. You have to stand under a tree and ask, I want this, then you'll get. But the beauty of the association of devotees, as is glorified in this verse, it is said that if one continues to remain in the association of those who are close to the Lord and dear to the Lord, then that association gives one everything. Here, everything refers to the full blessing of the personal association of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even without asking for it, even without asking. So that is the power. Because the reality is most of us don't even know what to ask for, right? Even if you are under a Kalpavriksha tree, what will we ask? Give me a good job, give me a COVID vaccine, give me a whatever else that we think will make us happy. But the beauty of the association of devotees is that it grants one the greatest good fortune even without asking. That is the beauty. Because very strongly the manifestation of the personality of Godhead happens in that association where devotees come together sincerely to glorify the Lord without any ulterior motive. The Lord is personally present there, and the scriptures say that. In the scriptures, the Lord says a pretty beautiful verse. I forgot which particular scripture that is, trying to recollect. But there is a very beautiful verse where the Lord is telling Narad Muni, Naham tishtami vaikunte yoginam hridayeshu va yatra gayanti madbhakta tatra tishtami Narada. That I may be in Vaikuntha or I may not be in Vaikuntha. Sometimes I may go out for some special pastimes. I may be in the heart of the yogis who are meditating. Sometimes I may decide to disappear from there also. I may or may not be there also. You cannot be sure that I am there. But there is one place, Yatra Gayanti Madbhakta, wherever my devotees are chanting and discussing my glories and holy names. Tatra Tishtami Narada. Narad, you can be very, very sure I am personally present there. That is why, especially Hanumanji, who's the Chiranjeevi and who's in this world, who's missing Lord Ram so much, it is said wherever Ram Katha is being discussed in a pure way, by pure souls, Hanumanji definitely comes there because there he can find the presence of Shri Ram. Yatra gayanti madbhakta tatra tishtami narada. I am there without fail. So when the Lord is present in that association, the potency of that presence of the Lord is so purifying and so elevating, and such blessings come upon us even far beyond what we deserve, and even far beyond what we can even ask for, because most of us don't even know what to ask for. Satam Sangha Sakalam Prasuti. So that is this beauty. So I was discussing with one devotee just a couple of days ago, and he was going from Malaysia back to India. He's been attending our classes. Right now, he's not in the class. He's probably traveling. But I was talking to him, and I said, whatever happens, always remain connected to satsanga, the association of devotees. Of course, it doesn't have to be that devotee means that you have to connect it to, specifically me or this class. I mean, there are so many satsangs. As long as the satsang is properly connected to the parampara and there is pure glorification of the Lord. What does pure mean? Pure mean one, according to the scriptures, the pure message, unadulterated. And second is where the glorification of the Lord and his devotees happens without any material motivation. Where the whole purpose is to just please and serve the Lord and purify oneself and develop oneself spiritually. When in that association, one discusses the glories of the Lord, the potency of that association is tremendous. So we should thank the Lord that He has allowed us to have this environment to discuss His glories in the association. Yes, of course, it doesn't matter so much who's speaking and who's listening. It doesn't matter. That is the reality. If you are listening more attentively and with greater devotion than the speaker, you can actually make more advancement than the speaker also. So what really matters is that our consciousness, great humility, love, gratitude is offered at the lotus feet of the Lord, and our hearts are absorbed in remembering Him with great love and in appreciating His wonderful divine name, form, qualities, and pastimes. So, congratulations to all of you that we have all received this blessing from the Lord to be a part of such an environment. This is actually a very great blessing. In fact, this is one of the most rarest of all blessings, according to the scriptures. Many people think the greatest blessing of the Lord is beauty, wealth, success. All these things, even if they come as blessings from the Lord, they are going to disappear very soon with this body. Even if at all they last for the entire duration that the body lasts. Actually, it doesn't, right? Yeah. Even the most beautiful person, how long are they well known? Maybe from their early 20s, maybe to early 40s. After 40s, people start thinking that, oh, this is no longer a fresh apple. It's an apple which is shriveled. Yes. The skin starts shriveling. The same hero and heroines whom everybody would, love to see and put their posters. Then people start saying, hey, why is he dancing with young girls? He's become so old already. So material beauty is like that. Couple of decades at best. And no matter what wealth, what power, everything actually disappears very soon by the force of time. Time is a very powerful factor. In fact, today's topic that we are going to discuss is all about time. So those who are smart and intelligent, they understand that the real blessing is that which time cannot take away. Because all other things time will take away, isn't it? Ultimately in the form of death, if not earlier. What is that blessing that time cannot take away? Time affects only material things. Time does not affect spiritual wealth. Time does not affect the attraction that one has developed for the Lord. Time does not affect the faith that one has developed for the Lord. Time does not even affect the blessings that the Lord has given to the soul. Carries on forever. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says, Neha bhikramana ashosti pratyavayo na vidyate swalpamapi asya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. That in this endeavor, Arjun, of spiritual advancement, there is never any loss. Even a little bit you gain and acquire is never ever lost because it is spiritual in nature. It doesn't go away by the effect of time. Swalpam api asya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. Even if you have billions and billions of dollars, nobody can save you from death. But even if you have a little bit of spiritual credit, it can save you from the greatest calamity that death can bring for you, which is to go into the lower species of life. So that is the great power of time. So those who are wise, those who understand the spiritual science, they understand, let me not invest in those things which time will eventually crush and destroy. Let me invest those things which are of eternal value. So our journey on the Srimad Bhagavat, we are on the third canto. We are on chapter number 11 today. This is the discussion of Maitreya Rishi with Viduraji. And in chapter 11, after having described how Brahmaji was blessed with the power of creation, his prayers, and how Brahmaji started creating the various planetary system and the various species. We discussed this last time. In the last class, if you recollect, Viduraji had also asked Maitreya Muni, please also tell me about the time factor. Explain to me its division and how it impacts at different levels and different living entities. And in that chapter, because Maitreya Muni was focused more on the process of creation and the different species and categories and how that whole process was affected by Brahma, he just briefly answered that question. But in this chapter, Maitreya Muni is devoting this entire chapter to time. So this chapter is very interesting. It is mostly technical information, but it is very interesting information. Because time is very important to understand. So, Maitreya Muni starts this particular chapter by trying to define how time is measured in this world. Now, time is a very subtle energy, right? It's very subtle, it's very imperceptible. It was already described in the previous chapter, very imperceptible. One cannot actually understand how time is working. It's very subtle, it's practically intangible. The only way we can describe and perceive time is in terms of the transformation that it produces in terms of the observable phenomena, isn't it? What is observable for us in this world? Matter is observable to us. Yes. Matter and the and what it occupies in terms of distance is perceptible to us, and movement is perceptible to us. Yes. So for us, if we want to describe time, the only way we can describe time is with respect to matter and movement. Yes. So that is what exactly Maitreya Muni is about to do when he's explaining. And Maitreya Muni starts this explanation of time by saying that actually, Viduraji, there are many divisions of time. There is time at a micro level, there is time at a macro level. I will describe everything to you. But before I get into time, let me describe some aspects with respect to matter because they form the basis of definition of time. So he starts by saying that in this material manifestation, whatever is made out of matter, when you start decomposing whatever is material into smaller and smaller and smaller particles, finally you come down to one very, very tiny, indivisible particle of matter, which is not forming a body, but just it's like it's the smallest particle of matter from which all the other bodies are made. That particle is known as Paramanu. So, in very simple words, in terms of modern physics, the Paramanu can be translated into an atom or a subatomic particle, both ways. Atom, correct? Actually, by modern physics or chemistry definition also, what is an atom? The smallest indivisible part of an element is an atom. So actually, interestingly, the Bhagavad gives a very similar definition of atom. The smallest indivisible part from the combination of which all other things are formed is known as an atom. And ultimately, all material creation is a combination of these atoms. And the time potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, what is its relation to the atom? He starts describing by saying that this atom is actually very, very tiny. It cannot even be seen. When two of these Paramanus, these very tiny particles, indivisible particles, combine, it forms what is known as an Anu. Anu is like a double atom. Now, how this exactly correlates with modern physics is not mentioned here, but anyway, that is not the topic of the discussion. But it is said these two tiny particles combine to form an Anu, which is known as a double atom, and three such Anus, each comprising two Paramanus. When they combine, they form what is known as Trasarenu, or in English, can be called as a hexatom. So essentially, a hexatom is a combination of three Anus, each of which has two Paramanus. Essentially, it means it's the combination of 6 Paramanus. Now, one may wonder why all this description is being given. The reason it is being given is that the distance occupied by a Trisharenu or the hexatom, 6 times the smallest indivisible particle of matter, becomes the foundation for the measurement of time. That is why this is being mentioned. It's very interesting. And how is this time mentioned? How is this time defined? It is said that the amount of time that the sun takes, Surya takes, to cover a distance equal to that occupied by the Trisharenu. To pass 3 Trisharenus, not 1, or 3 hexatoms, is called as a Truti. That's the smallest definition of time in the Vedic parlance. Okay, again, if you take 1 Trisharenu, which has 6 hexatoms, which has 6 Paramanus, and you keep 3 such Trisharenus next to each other, the distance that it covers, how much time does it take for the sun to cover that distance? What does that mean? For the sun to cover that distance? The sun is in motion in the orbit, right? Yeah. How long does the sun take to go around, or rather, how long does the earth take to go around the sun? Of course, from an earth's perspective, the sun is moving. From the sun's perspective, the earth is moving. But the distance that is covered by the sun in its orbit and the amount of time it takes to pass the distance which is covered by 3 Trisharenus is known as a Truti. There is a very, very small division of time. Now, when we convert that division of time into the modern measurements of seconds, that Truti works out to be roughly 8 divided by 13,500 seconds. 8 upon 13,500 seconds. Yeah, now I'm not going to go into how that mathematical calculation came about. We can discuss that separately if needed. Yeah, but that is, it's not about the mathematics, but that is the smallest measurement. Truti. That is one Truti. So as the sun is moving, the amount of time the sun takes to cover that distance of 3 Trisharenus, that is defined as a Truti. It's very interesting. And that is the smallest time that can be defined. Because below that, practically nothing is perceptible to us. Even Truti is practically non-perceptible, but maybe from the perspective of certain very low-level physical processes, maybe that is a bit more perceptible. And then Maitreya Muni goes on to describe slightly bigger and bigger definitions of time. He says, when you have 100 Trutis together, that is known as a Veda. And when we put 3 Vedas together, that becomes equal to a Lava. Have you heard the word Lava? In terms of time, Lava Matra Sadhu Sangha Sarva Siddhi Hoy. There are many verses which refer to Truti in the scriptures. There are many verses which refer to Veda. There are verses which refer to Lava. And it is said 3 Lava is equal to 1 Nimisha. Nimishardhakyo api vrajati nahi yatrapi samayah. What is a Nimisha? Nimisha is 3 Lava and it is roughly half a second. It is 8 upon 15th of a second. Roughly half a second is Nimisha. It is said Krishna does not leave Vrindavan even for a Nimisha, even for half a second. He doesn't leave Vrindavan. Nimishardhakyo api vrajati nahi yatrapi samayah. Jay Shvetadvipam tamaham golokamitiyam vidantaste santaha shiti viralachara karti. This is from the Brahma Samhita, which Lord Brahma says. And 3 nimishas make 1 kshana. I think this term kshana probably is more common for most of you. Most of you must have heard the word kshan. Kshan is common even within Hindi, Marathi, and so many North Indian languages. I'm not sure about South India if the term kshana is used in Tamil and other languages. We use the word kshana in the sense of a moment. Kshan, ek kshan ke liye. In English nowadays, we will say like just for 1 second. Just give me something. Let me talk for 1 second. Ek kshan, 1 moment. Can I have 1 moment of your time? Just give me a little bit attention. Kshan is said to be, almost from a transactional perspective, almost like the smallest thing that we can perceive from a day-to-day interaction. What is the meaning of what is the actual duration of a kshana? The scriptures say the actual duration of a kshana is around 1.6 seconds. How much? 1.6 seconds. So he goes on to give bigger and bigger divisions of time, and he says 5 such kshanas add up to be a kashta, and 15 such kashtas add up to be a laghu. Laghu is roughly around 2 minutes in terms of modern calculations. Laghu. And 15 laghus make up what is known as a Nadika or a Danda. So Laghu is roughly half an hour. And two such Nadikas or Dandas comprise one Muhurta. You've heard the term Muhurta? Yes, auspicious Muhurta, not auspicious Muhurta, right? We say, right? What is the Muhurta? A Muhurta is roughly a period of the day which spans roughly around an hour. Two Dandas or two Nadikas. And then it is also said, now practically, obviously, we cannot measure time. Yeah, obviously, we cannot measure time by trying to see how fast the sun is running, by keeping, three Trisharenus in line and seeing how fast it takes, right? Obviously, it's not going to work out. It's a very theoretical definition for us, even though it is a correct one given by scriptures. But there's a practical way the scriptures give. In the Bhagavatam, it is mentioned. This Nadika or Danda, which is roughly around half an hour, how to practically measure it from a day-to-day perspective. So the scripture says that if you make a pot of copper, which is around 14 ounces of weight, and in that, at the bottom of that pot, you make a hole with a gold probe, and that gold probe weighs 4 masa. This mass also is a measurement of weight in the Vedic system. And it measures 4 fingers long. Such a pot, when it is placed on water, what happens? When it is placed on water, slowly the water starts seeping into the pot. And the pot starts filling. Okay? It's a pot of a particular dimension with a hole made by gold at the bottom of a particular dimension. When it is placed on water, slowly the water starts seeping into the pot, and the pot starts filling and going inside the water. The amount of time it takes for the water to fill that pot, the scriptures say, is a danda, or roughly half an hour. I don't know whether you observed this in olden times. Actually, they would actually measure. This is like an hourglass. Hourglass, right? Turn it around and the sand goes from one side to another. Yeah. It's a similar concept. Yeah, but this is in terms of how the water gets filled. Yeah. So it is giving that explanation that it takes around that much time for the water to fill. Half an hour. That's how you measure half an hour. So in olden times, if it was a 3-hour exam, and there was no watch there, what they would do, they would use this danda. They would use this pot, measure a danda, which is half an hour. After the pot is full, they'll empty it again, put it again up. Like that, they will do it for 6 times. And 3 hours has passed. Yes, just to give you some sense of how time is measured at a very more practical day-to-day level. Of course, at a bigger level, the sun's movement gives some idea across the day, but that is over many hours. But when you want to measure half an hour and all that, it becomes very difficult. So this is a practical way to measure. So like we said, 2 such dandas, or these 2 half-hour periods, correspond to a muhurta. And 3 muhurtas, roughly, or 6 or 7 dandas, correspond to what is known as a prahara. A prahara is sometimes also known as a yama. Sometimes called as pratha prahara. Pratha means early morning period. And the day time comprises 4 praharas, and the night comprises 4 prahara. So each prahara is roughly 3 hours in duration. So an entire day is comprised of 8 such praharas, and that comes out to be 24 hours. Okay, so very quickly recapping, this is all technical information. It's okay if you do not remember all the details, but now I'm going in the reverse direction. A day which is of 24 hours comprises of 8 prahara, and each prahara is 3 hours approximately, and each prahara comprises of 3 muhurtas roughly, and the muhurta comprises of 2 danda, and each danda is made up of 15 laghus, and each laghu is made of 15 kashtas, and each kashta is made of 5 kshanas, and every kshana is made of 3 nimishas, and so on, so on, so on, so on. Okay, and of course, these lower divisions below kshana is practically, unless you are a scientist or you are measuring some, very small, tiny measurements of time, it is practically, not something at a practical level that we need. Yeah. Probably beyond a lava or a nimisha, practically, we don't need those kind of time measurements from a day-to-day perspective for us. So after having described the divisions up to a day, yeah, and just mind you, ultimately we are referring to the day, and why we are referring to the day? Ultimately, the day is also about relative motion between the earth and the sun. So ultimately for us, time is measured in terms of how we move with respect to the sun. And that is why the measurement is also specified in terms of the motion of the sun over a particular distance. And then Maitreya Muni starts describing bigger divisions of time beyond the day. He says 15 days comprises a fortnight. Paksha. Paksha is a fortnight. Shukla Paksha, Krishna Paksha. And 2 such Pakshas or fortnights make up a month. And actually, there's one interesting thing mentioned when this Paksha is mentioned. The Paksha has a very special significance. While the Paksha on earth is 15 days, Shukla Paksha 15 days, Krishna Paksha, and that comprises a month. This 15 days and 15 days Shukla Paksha and Krishna Paksha corresponds to 1 day on the planet of the Pitris. So for us, it is 30 days or 1 month. But on the planet of the Pitris, the planet of the ancestors, the perception of time there is that of 1 day. Because time is relative. Our perception of time and the perception of time on other planets is different. Again, the perception of time is very much dependent on the planetary motions and the orbital motions. This is mentioned in the Bhagavad. So the planet of the Pitris, for them, their perception of the passing of 1 day is equal to our perception of the passing of 1 month. And two such months comprise a season. Now you may be wondering, oh, from where did we get so many seasons? So unfortunately, for those of us who are in Malaysia, we barely see any seasons change. But actually, there are 6 seasons the scriptures describe. Yes. Who can describe? Who can tell me what are the 6 seasons? Anyone here? Volunteers? What are the 6 seasons according to the Vedas?
I remember only Vasant, bro.
No, I don't want one. I want full 6. Yeah, Praveen Pro. Yes, Vasant is correct. It is one of the seasons. What are the others? Okay, so homework.
ग्रीष्म ऋतु, वर्षा ऋतु, शरद ऋतु, वसंत ऋतु. मुझे भूल गया.
हेमंत ऋतु.
हेमंत ऋतु, या.
हेमंत ऋतु.
And Vasant ऋतु. and Vasant Ritu.
What about rainy season?
बोला ना ग्रीष्म ऋतु वर्षा ऋतु.
Varsha Ritu.
I mean, this is Shuddh Hindi. Sorry.
No, I
Winter,
understand Hindi.
summer,
That's not a
rainy.
problem. Yeah, okay. You had mentioned Varsha also. Okay, fine. Yeah. So like that, 6, right? Yeah. So there is the spring, summer, rainy. Yeah. Then there is autumn. There is winter. Yeah. So there are total of 6 seasons, Hemant and Sharad. Yeah. So there is a subdivision there also. So there are total of 6 seasons. So roughly around 2 months each. And actually in each of these seasons, the kind of vegetation, the flowers, the environment, the air, the temperature, all of these vary. And it's very nice because, when the seasons vary, the environment changes, we feel also refreshed and nice as the seasons, change from one to another. So that is nice. So anyway, so 2 months is roughly compared to a season, and 6 months is called as a ayana. What is an ayan? An ayan is a movement of the sun in a particular direction. What direction? Either the movement of the sun in the northern hemisphere or the movement of the sun in the southern hemisphere. Yes. So one ayan is called Uttara Ayana and another ayan is called Dakshina Ayana. Correct. In modern geography, we will say this is where the earth either tilts towards the north tilts towards the sun or the south tilts towards the sun. Yeah, for 6 months. Yes, based on that, the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere also experience various seasons. So there's the Uttarayan 6 months and the Dakshinayan 6 months. And these two ayanas put together, 6 months plus 6 months, is said to be a Samvatsara. Samvatsara means one complete year of the sun, or roughly 12 months. So this is the description that is given by Maitreya Rishi, and he says that the sun is actually so great and so powerful, and actually practically all life is possible because of the sun. And the Bhagavatam says one should, that is why, properly offer respect to the sun and worship the sun, the Bhagavad says, at least once every 5 years. Yeah? Then Maitreya Muni moves over to the other topic. He has now defined the divisions of time. Now he starts explaining the time perception in the different planetary systems. He has described with respect to our experience the time with respect to the motion of the sun. Now he starts explaining, because Vidura had asked how time is experienced in different planetary systems. Maitreya Muni says that the lifespan which is experienced by those who are in Swarga and the Pitralok and the earth is different. Vidura wants to know all that. And he starts explaining. So I think some of these answers we already discussed. The answer is that at the planet of the Pitris, 1 month of hours is equal to 1 day of the Pitris. And for the Devata Swargaloka, rather than the Paksha, like for the Pitris, 1 Paksha is day and 1 Paksha is night. For the Devatas, our 1 Ayana is a day and 1 Ayana is the night. So Uttarayana is the day, Dakshinayana is the night. So 1 year of earth on Swargaloka, the time goes at a rate where the perception is our 1 year is equal to their 1 day. Our 1 year is equal to 1 day of the Devatas. And the scriptures say actually all living entities across all the universe, across all planets, everybody lives for 100 years. up to 100 years, roughly. Okay? They are designed to live. Of course, nowadays, most people don't live up to 100 years because we lead such unhealthy lives that most of us don't survive to see 100 years. But Shatayur Vai Purushaha, the Vedas say, that human body is designed to live for 100 years. So humans live 100 years of earth. The Pitris live 100 years of the Pitri planet. The Devatas also live 100 years of their planet. Brahma also lives 100 years of Brahmaloka. Everybody lives 100 years. But our 100 years are different from their 100 years. But their perception of the flow of time is also very similar to ours. So if you're on Brahmaloka, your experience of the flow of time for one day will be similar to what you would have experienced if you are on earth. But in the time that one day is experienced on Brahmaloka, 8.64 billion years of earth have passed. Okay, so that is the description which follows in the next verse. And now Maitreya Muni is explaining the relative experience of time across the different planetary systems. First, he starts by describing from a universal perspective how time is distributed. So he says that at a universal level, time is measured in terms of yugas. There are 4 yugas: Satya, Treta, Dwapar, and Kali. These 4 yugas put together is called as a Chatur Yuga or a Divya Yuga. This Chatur Yuga or Divya Yuga is equal in duration to 12,000 years of the Devatas. And 12,000 years of the Devatas is roughly equal to 4.3 million years on Earth, roughly. So the Kali Yuga, which is around, or Earth years, is 432,000 years. Is equal to 1,200 years of the Devatas. The duration of the Dwapar Yuga is twice the duration of the Kali Yuga. It is 2,400 demigod years or 864,000 Earth years. The Treta Yuga duration is 3 times that of the Kali Yuga. And in Earth years, it is 1,296,000 years. And the Satya Yuga's duration is 4 times that of Kali Yuga, which is equal to approximately 1.728 million Earth years. So if you add all these years together, x plus 2x plus 3x plus 4x, x being the Kali Yuga duration, it equals to 10x. Okay, which means the entire duration of the Chatur Yuga is 10 times the duration of Kali Yuga. So it's roughly 4.32 million years. That is just one Chatur Yuga. And this one Chatur Yuga is actually such a small period from the perspective of the universal creation. Now one may wonder, actually, before going into higher time, what does this Chatur Yuga actually essentially mean in logical terms? What it means is, the Bhagavad describes that these are small in the universal sense. Of course, big if we compare it to our years, but these are small cycles of time. Cycles in what sense? Cycles of what? What is this Chatur Yuga cycle about? This Chatur Yuga cycle is about the cycle of dharma. That at the beginning of Satya Yuga, dharma is almost 100% in order. And gradually, by influence of time, dharma starts reducing and adharma starts coming in. When Satya transitions to Treta, 25% of dharma is gone and replaced by 25% adharma. After Treta goes, another 25% of dharma is gone. So it becomes 50% dharma and 50% adharma. In Dwapar Yuga, starts with 50% dharma, ends up in only 25% dharma and 75% adharma. Kali Yuga begins with only 25% dharma and ends with almost zero. And at that end of that period, which is roughly 4.32 million years, the Lord has to reset that whole cycle because dharma is practically gone. He comes back as Kalki avatar and re-establishes religion by destroying all the demoniac forces and re-establishes Satya Yuga by force. Again brings up to 100%. And then again the cycle goes on. 75, 50, 25, 0. Again push it up to 100%. So that is how the cycle of the Chatur Yugas goes on. Satya, Treta, Dwapar, Kali. Again go up. Satya, Treta, Dwapar, Kali. Again push up. So that push is done by the incarnation of the Lord, especially the Kalki incarnation of the Lord. So that is the cyclical process which is continuously going on. And these Chatur Yugas, it is said 1000 such Chatur Yugas comprise the daytime of Brahma. And this daytime of Brahma is divided into 14 parts known as the 14 Manvantaras. And each Manvantara or period of Manu is equal to approximately 71 such Divya Yugas or Divya cycles. And what is the significance of Manvantara? The significance of Manvantara is that at the beginning of each Manvantara, there are 14 Manvantaras in one day of Brahma. At the beginning of each Manvantara, a Manu, who's an incarnation of the Lord, comes and establishes dharma and rules over that period. Along with that Manu, I mentioned this many times, every Manvantara has an appointed set of Devatas. Indra and all the Devatas are appointed along with the Sapta Rishis and various other prominent hosts, including various Prajapatis. They are appointed at the beginning of the Manvantara and they live throughout the duration of that Manvantara. And the Devatas and these sages get changed at the end of every Manvantara. So 14 Manvantaras comprise one day of Brahma. And again, during the Manvantaras also, apart from the Manu incarnation, so many other Leela avatars and various other avatars of the Lord appear in this world to do what Krishna described. Paritranaya sadhunam, vinashaya cha dushkritam, dharma sansthapanarthaya, sambhavami yuge. Krishna comes, Matsya, Varaha, Kurma, Narsingha, Vamana, so many Leela avatars, so many Shaktiavesh avatars, and so on and so forth. Yuga avatars, Manvantar avatars, we also discussed. So these prominent incarnations come across the Manvantaras to assist in the establishment of dharma. Now, of course, over the Manvantaras across the different planets, we discussed about the 14 planetary systems, right? Yeah. Within the Manvantaras up to Swarga Loka, from the lowest planet, Patal, to the planet of the Swarga Loka. Yes. If you remember the 14 planetary systems, I hope you remember, correct? Earth, Bhu, Bhuva, Swaha, Janar, Mahar, Tapa, Satya, up. Then below the earth, okay, there are Atal, Sutal, Vital, Talatal, Rasatal, yeah, all the way up to Patal. Patal is the lowest. So all these 14 planetary systems, out of these 14 up to Swarga, so many living entities are born and they die. They are born and they die within this Manvantara period. So according to their karma, correct? For us, if you are born on the earth, we probably will go through thousands of births on earth in one Manvantara period. Of course, for the Devatas, the Manvantara is a significantly big portion of time. So probably for them, not so many lifetimes. For the bigger Devatas like Indra, it's just one lifetime, the whole Manvantara for them. Yeah. But for some of the other lesser Devatas, maybe a few. They may not necessarily live as long as Indra and the other Devatas. But what happens for those whose lifespan, Vidura asked this question, what happens, O Maitreya Muni, for those whose lifespan is beyond the lifespan of one day of Brahma? One kalpa. One day of Brahma is known as one kalpa. So again, so you don't lose perspective. Sorry, this is a bit technical information. So if you enjoy technical information, you will enjoy this. Otherwise, you may get bored. So forgive me, but this chapter is full of this technical information. It is good to know. So one day of Brahma, the 14 Manvantaras is equal to 12 hours of Brahma's life, and equal duration is 12 hours of his night of Brahma. Now, if you recollect, we had discussed this in one of the earlier classes. What happens during Brahma's night? During Brahma's night also there is a kind of destruction that happens. There are many levels of destruction, right? Remember, there are 3 levels of destruction we discussed in the last chapter. One is destruction when our life ends, which is so many times it will happen. Then there is destruction at the end of the day of Brahma. And then there is the final destruction, which is at the end of the life of Brahma. Yes, of course, end of the life of Brahma, we already know everything is dissolved and becomes unmanifested, including Brahma himself. But what happens at the end of the day of Brahma? It is said that as the end of the day of Brahma comes, there is a kind of destruction which sweeps practically all the planets, especially up to Swargaloka, including the heavens, which means practically even all the Devatas are wiped out. So this chapter of the Bhagavatam describes what happens at the end of the daytime of Brahma. It is said initially there is massive destruction by flooding across all the various planets, all the way up to Swargaloka. And after that, from Lord Sankarshan's mouth, it is said, an unbearable heat in the form of fire is produced, which practically burns and scorches all the planets, and practically all life up to Swargaloka is destroyed. So practically all the lower planets and even Bhuva Swa up to Swargaloka, everything is annihilated. It is said the fire that comes from Sankarshan is so hot and so burning that even though directly Maharlok, which is just above Swargalok, is not entirely burned, the heat is so scorching that the residents of Maharlok run away to Janarlok, one planet higher, because they cannot tolerate the heat. This happens at the end of the day of Brahma. But no other living entities up to Swargaloka can survive that state. They remain in a state of suspension for the night of Brahma. In fact, it is said, and I don't know how this works, but it is said that the sun and the moon also are said to fade during the period of the night of Brahma. Now, how they are faded, I don't know what kind of, like, some light bulbs, you can just lower the current and it fades. It's like during the night of Brahma, the whole universe is kind of a bit dark. All that is described is that the sun and the moon are made to fade during the period of the night of Brahma. And then when Brahma wakes up again, he takes up the process of recreating all these planets which are annihilated. And then, of course, the sages who have temporarily relocated, they come back, to the Maharloka. And then again, the Manvantaras continue. Again, the new day of Brahma, again 14 Manvantaras, 14 sets of Devatas. And again, at the end of 14 Manvantaras, again the same dissolution happens. Day of Brahma, night of Brahma, day of Brahma, night of Brahma, goes on and on and on for 100 years of Brahma. Very interesting. So what is the lifetime of Brahma? The lifetime of Brahma is his 100 years, which is actually equal to Earth, in Earth terms, roughly 311 trillion years. 311 trillion years. Now, the interesting thing that is mentioned is this lifetime of Brahma which is 311 trillion years, is divided into two halves. This is again a very interesting part of information. Please listen. It's very interesting. The 100 years of Brahma is divided into two portions of 50-50 years. Each portion is known as a Parardha. So the first Parardha of Brahma's life, the first 50 years is over. And now, currently, the second Parardha has just started. I had mentioned this in some classes earlier. The second 50 years onwards. So Brahma has just completed half his life right now. And today's day, I'm not talking about 30th January, I'm talking about today's day of Brahma. Yeah. Which spans 4.32 billion years. Yeah. Today's day of Brahma is the first day of Brahma of his 51st year. This is what the scriptures mention. Very interesting piece of information. So Brahma's calendar also has been told to us, not just our calendar. So according to Brahma's calendar, Brahma has just completed his 50th birthday. Yesterday he celebrated. It's his 50th birthday. And his actual birthday, because every day of Brahma is known as a Kalpa, the actual birthday of Brahma is known as Brahma Kalpa. That is the first day of the life of Brahma. And the day after the first day is when the lotus sprang. And that day of Brahma is known in the scriptures as Padma Kalpa. That is the day in which the universal lotus comes from the navel of Garbhodakshay Vishnu. So first Brahma is born in the first Parardha on the first day, and that particular day is known as Brahma Kalpa, or it is also known as Shveta Varaha Kalpa. The second day is known as Padma Kalpa, where the lotus sprouts and manifests a universal form. And today's day, the first day of the second Parardha, is known as the Varaha Kalpa. Actually, every day of Brahma has a unique name. The scriptures mention all these names. We don't have to by heart all of them. But today's day is known as the Varaha Kalpa. It is the first day of the second half of Brahma's life. And it is known as Varaha Kalpa because the Lord in the form of the boar incarnation, the Varaha. There are two Varahas which appear. There is one Shveta Varaha and there is a Rakta Varaha. The red boar incarnation, the white boar incarnation. So, the second incarnation, the red boar incarnation appeared the Varaha Kalpa, this particular Kalpa. Can you imagine how long is Brahma's life as compared to Earth years? And the Bhagavatam goes on to say, please understand, this entire duration of the life of Brahma, as far as the Supreme Lord is concerned, it is equal to one nimisha of time for the Supreme Lord. Okay, let's go back and see what is nimisha. Does anybody remember how much time is a nimisha? Anyone? Any bright students who remembered what I told or made notes? How much time of Earth is one nimisha? One nimisha is roughly half a second. Okay? One nimisha is roughly half a second. So the entire process of full existence of Brahmasa, this full material creation, from the point of view of Lord Mahavishnu, who's lying in the Karanodaka ocean, is like one nimisha, half a second. Can you imagine how many creations are coming and going continuously, endlessly? How huge, how powerful, how gigantic is this Mahavishnu? And you know what else is mentioned? Not only is the duration of the life of Brahma, the life of this entire universe, equal to one nimisha, the size of the universe as compared to the size of the body of Mahavishnu. How big is it? It is almost like atoms. For us, how atoms are in a size to us, similarly, the universe that is coming out from the body of Mahavishnu are like tiny atomic particles coming out from the body of Mahavishnu. They come out, last for half a second, dissolve. Come out for half a second, dissolve. Small, small particles. You've seen this, the Diwali sparklers? You've seen Diwali sparklers? Yes. The Diwali sparklers, it just goes out, throws out sparks. Half a second, right? Nimisha, it just comes out, goes. Just blips, blips, blips here and there. I hope you can visualize it. Sorry, I'm not so good at explaining this. But all these sparklers, so it's just like particles coming out from Mahavishnu's body, like blips in space. And each half a second blip is an entire duration of the lifetime of Brahma. That is the magnitude of creation. And there are unlimited such universes. Ananta Koti Brahmanda. It's just absolute mind-boggling. We cannot figure out. It's amazing. And it is said, our universe, which is so small, is measured to be roughly of a diameter of 4 billion miles. And is made up of the 8 elements: earth, water, the five Panchamahabhutas, and mind, intelligence, ego. And each of the universe is like an egg shape, and it is covered by different elements. And they appear like atoms coming out from the body of Mahavishnu. So the might and power of Mahavishnu is unlimited. And the Brahma Samhita says, Vishnur Mahan Ya Asya Kala Vishesha. That this great Mahavishnu is just a part of the part of the part of the part of Sri Krishna Govinda. That tiny cowherd boy plays his flute, plays in Braj, dances with the gopis, steals laddu from the tiffin box of his friends. This great big Mahavishnu is an expansion of the expansion of the expansion of the expansion of that great Lord. So how can we estimate Krishna's greatness? We cannot. Brahmaji was bewildered by Krishna. So it's so amazing. Anyway, we have run over time, so I was about to tell one story, but then I suddenly noticed it is 10:11. So I'm not going to go into that. Maybe next time I will start with that story. If you all remind me about Lord Brahma and how he was humbled by the Lord. So that is the greatness of the Lord. So Vidura is being explained all this information by Maitreya Muni. And this also not only explains technically the divisions of time, but also it makes us understand how tiny and insignificant we are in the ultimate grand scheme of things. When we hear all this and when we reflect on it, we realize that, my problems and my issues and all this are actually so small. But we think we are the center of the universe. Who's the real center for this whole material manifestation? Lord Mahavishnu is the center. Now, who is Mahavishnu's center? Krishna is the center of Mahavishnu also. In fact, when Krishna appeared in this world, it is said even Mahavishnu wanted to see and meet Krishna. And there is a beautiful pastime in the scriptures described where Mahavishnu orchestrated a particular Leela to be able to interact with Krishna face to face. It's a very sweet pastime. Now you may be thinking, how is that possible? Mahavishnu is God, Krishna is also God. Yes, they are both God. They are both simultaneously the same person, but at the same time, Mahavishnu is God, but is also a special manifestation of God. So they also have wonderful interaction between each other. It's very amazing. Anyway, so I'll take a pause here. It's almost 10:15. So thank you for patiently hearing and sorry for running a little bit late. So any comments or questions? Okay, so thank you for patiently listening. And please read this chapter, very sweet. A lot of technical information, but I'm sure it's very hard to remember all this technically. But as you can go through the chapter, then you will be able to remember all this information. If you want, I can try to see whether there is any place where I can just give a summary. Let me see if that's possible. Okay, so thank you very much. Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.